December 28th, and I have started my TBR spin book for October. Yes, you heard that right. I am still doing the TBR Spin 2024, and I'm still quite a ways behind where I should be. Tomorrow, Sarah from Freshly Read Books is going to be announcing the first spin for the 2025 TBR Spin. If you don't know what the TBR Spin is, it is a super fun booktube game, reading game, where you pick 12 books at the start of the year. Each month, Sarah will spin a wheel with prompts on it. Those prompts lead us to pick a book off of our stack. So in January, we have 12 books, and then we spin the wheel, and then you get a book, you read it. In February, you have 11 books, you spin the wheel, you get a prompt, you read that book, etc. The prompts sometimes require you to swap out a book. The prompts sometimes require you to look elsewhere besides your stack, but the majority of the idea of the game is to read at least 12 books off of your TBR over the course of the year. So I've played this game for the past 2 years, and I definitely plan to continue it in 2025. I vlog all of my TBR Spin books, so you can see some playlists of my various TBR Spin vlogs down below. This year in 2024, I got really far behind, so I'm still working through the last of the 2024 books. I'm hoping that by the end of January, I kind of caught up all the way. So I will have read my October, November, and December books from 2024, and also my January book for 2025. What I like to do is read the book in a vlog, and then at the end of the vlog, watch the spin and pick my book for the next vlog. So I plan on continuing doing that. Like I said, I am on my October book, and the prompt for October was to read like the spookiest book on your stack. So I picked Night of the Living Rez by Morgan Talty. It's out in the living rooms, thinking it was a horror book. Night of the Living Rez. I knew it was written by an Indigenous author, but like Night of the Living Rez, it must be like Night of the Living Dead. They must be short stories, short horror stories, all about living on the reservation, right? No, it's just short stories about living on the reservation. There's no horror. So I definitely got this prompt wrong. This prompt is definitely, I mean, I still think maybe it was my spookiest book on the list, because none of the books were very spooky at all, but it's definitely not a spooky book. It's definitely not a scary book. But it has a kind of spooky title, so we'll stick it with that. I've only read 4 short stories so far, and all the short stories that I've read so far are interconnected. So we are seeing a family, a young son and his mother, who are returning to the res and now living with a man that the mother met on the reservation. Our young main character's dad is white, and obviously the mom and he have split up, and that's part of the reason that our main character and his mom have moved back to the reservation. But we see like the connection to the reservation, the relationship with the young man and his mother, how his father is even more of an outsider now that he is not in the picture as much, that he is not around every day. So there's been a couple of stories about those people, and then there's been a couple of stories about Dee and Phyllis, who are best friends, both recovering drug addicts, both on methadone, both trying to survive on the res as not so young anymore men. They're like in their mid-20s or something like that, and we see their relationship that they have with the reservation and other people on the reservation, and we see how they get by day to day in some of these stories as well. So I'll be interested to see if they keep going the way that they have, and if they keep being about these people. And it'll be interesting to see if our young protagonist from the first stories that I talked about actually turn out to be one of the people in the second stories that I talked about, because I'm not, at this point, I'm just not sure. I will continue reading that. I'm reading it pretty slowly. I'm reading it like maybe a story a day, but maybe not even, maybe like half a story a day. The stories are a little bit long, like 30 pages each, which isn't crazy long, obviously, but a little bit too long to read like a couple every day. And also, because they keep going back and forth, I'm kind of trying specifically to pause between each one so that I don't get them confused. This is a book that if I looked back later after I finished, I might have wanted to read all the stories from one person together and then all the stories from another person together. I think that would have been a good way to read like Lot by Brian Washington. This reminds me a lot of Lot by Brian Washington. This reminds me a lot of If I Survive You. It reminds me a little bit of We the Animals. One of the major themes of books that I've read this year, especially specifically short story collections that I've read, is this kind of coming of age, but also people of color, specifically men of color, kind of being at that loose end, being at a crossroads in their life, having lived a hard life or having lived an easy life and now are living the opposite or are living a totally mundane life. So interesting. I'm thinking about doing a kind of trends in my reading from 2024 as some of my wrap-up content in January. So if that's something that you would be interested in, definitely let me know. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about today was that just now I went through all the books that I'm interested in for the TBR SPIN 2025, because if I'm going to join the live show tomorrow, I might need my list, even if I don't actually watch the actual spin. I wanted to do some short stories again. I wanted to do some books that I've been putting off, and I wanted to do some nonfiction. So let's start with the nonfiction. The first book that I chose was Olaudah Equino, The Life of Olaudah Equino, or Gustavus Vasa the African. So this is a slave narrative, and I believe this is a man who was a person of power in his life before he was sold into slavery. Next, I have A Black and Buddhist, What Buddhism Can Teach Us About Race, Resilience, Transformation, and Freedom. I heard someone on BookTube talk about this a long time ago, and I was super happy to find it in a little free library, and I'm super excited to get to this one. In 2024, I read Ceremony by Leslie Marmon Silko for the TBR Spin, so I thought it might be fitting to read The Turquoise Ledge, a memoir by Leslie Marmon Silko, in this TBR Spin. I started Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own by Eddie S. Glaude, like in 2022 or something, and I got only about not even a quarter of the way through, just a tiny bit of the way through before I stopped. I was reading a lot of other similar things at the time, and then I've just never gone back to it, partly because I know it's going to be so depressing, especially now, but I also think now is a good time to renew our initiative of reading and learning from the past to not repeat the bad things that have happened and to work to a more positive future. A modern classic is Cain by Jean Toomer. I've been wanting to read this one for a while and I keep putting it off, so I thought putting it in the TBR Spin would be a really good way that I would have to get to it. The same can be said of Love by Toni Morrison. I've only read one Toni Morrison book so far, which is horrible. I loved it so much. It was Sula, and I have been wanting to read more, but I'm somehow totally intimidated by it. Love specifically is about a black beach town, and I'm so excited to get to it, but I keep putting it off, so I feel like the spin is a good way to have to get to it. Something a little different is Spy Family. This is by Tatsuva Endo, and this is a graphic novel manga about a man who's a spy and then who has to gather his spy family around him. He just doesn't realize that the wife that he chooses is also a spy, the daughter is clairvoyant, and I think the dog can move stuff with his mind or something. I don't know, but it's supposed to be really good. I have volumes 1 and 2. I keep putting it off. I should just get to it. I also wanted to include some short stories like I did in 2024. So this is a Laotian author, Suvankan Samanvagsa, and How to Pronounce Knife. I've heard mixed things about this short story collection, but I really want to read it, and I was super happy to find it earlier this year. Coming back for another round of TBR Spin, I thought we would do The Dead Take the A Train. This got knocked out of my 2024 TBR Spin kind of late in the game, and I just don't know when I would get to it, and I definitely think we need a little horror in here. So here's this one. It's by Cassandra Kaw and Richard Kadri. Another book that I've had for a long time now and keep putting off is Louise Erdrich. This is The Sentence. Similar to Toni Morrison, I've only ever read one Louise Erdrich book, but I really, really enjoyed it, and I really, really want to read more. I keep picking up her books, so I need to read one. This book I don't think I'm particularly going to like, but that's kind of why I want to read it now and then save some of her other stuff for later. So again, I think the spin will help me get there. Another collection of short stories is 8 Men by Richard Wright. Richard Wright is most well known for the book Native Son, which I also have but have not read. I've never read any Richard Wright, so I thought this one might be a good one to get to. And finally, our 12th book and our final short story collection is The Dancing Girl of Izu and Other Stories by Yasunari Kawabata. So I've read 1 or 2 Yasunari Kawabata books so far and really like them. This book is translated by Martin Holman. I have a couple of other books by him as well, but I thought this collection of short stories would go perfectly for the TBR Spin. So let me know if you're taking part in the TBR Spin. Let me know if you did in 2024. What was your favorite book of your 2024 TBR Spin? What was the book that you wish you read for the spin but either got kicked off or you just never got to? Let me know in the comments below. When I read some more of Night of the Living Rez, I will let you know. I have finished Night of the Living Rez. I meant to come in and update you, but it's been a lot with the holidays and everything else, so I didn't have a chance. I thought this was really interesting. I really loved the writing. It's very bleak. It's not happy at all. There's no happy endings to any of these stories. There's nothing uplifting or hopeful about these stories. There's nothing, I mean, there's a little bit of joy, but like not much, you know? But this story follows David, or D, in various times in his life. It's hard to tell if this is autofiction. I mean, probably a little bit it's autofiction, but like a lot of horrible things happen in this, so I think it's less autofiction in the drama of it and probably more autofiction in the day-to-day. But who knows, really. So we followed David as a child and his relationship with his mother as they moved back to the Rez away from his white father. This takes place in Maine. We see how his mother has fallen in love with a native man and how he, on the reservation, and the relationship that David has with him. We see David's mother's struggles in general with all the people in her life, with her addictions and her own, and poverty and everything else that goes along with their lives on the reservation. We also meet David's sister, Paige, who kind of comes in and out of their lives, and it's unclear whether they share the same father, although it definitely doesn't seem like it from the stories. And then the other kind of half of these stories, we follow D, who is David when he's grown up. We see his own struggles with addiction. We see him being on methadone and the various stages of using methadone to get off of other drugs, but then still using other drugs, and how methadone itself is a very devastating drug. And we see his relationship with his best friend Felix, and we see the now relationship with his mother, and throughout these stories, which go back and forward in time, even within the two timelines, David as a child and Dee as an adult, we see how the different tragedies have happened in the family and different occurrences has happened in the family. We hear about Dee's grandmother, we hear about Dee's sister, we hear about Dee's mother's boyfriend, Frick, and all these people living on the Rez. And then also kind of how all the stories revolve around the Rez and where they live, and going into the woods or going into town or going to the main center of the Rez, and kind of the scattered but still very close in revolution around each other areas of the Rez, as well as with David's family and Dee's life. In the back, it says, in the acknowledgments, it says where each story was originally published. And I really wonder why they didn't just make this a novel. Like, I get that it was individual stories, but because it absolutely is just stories about one family, they all build on each other, they all are interconnected. I don't know why they didn't just have Morgan Talty kind of add in a couple of stories, like not change these, but add in a couple of stories to make it like a more cohesive novel with different timelines. I like the stories, and I like the jumping around, and I like that we see different timelines and different aspects of David's life, both as a child and as an adult. But I just think it would have been maybe more impactful as a novel, because I could really see some of the shocking moments, some of the drama then being balanced with some of the other parts. Whereas I think like with a short story, you kind of need a punch at the end of every short story. So those super dramatic short stories were that. But then in all the other short stories, you're kind of waiting for that. And I just feel like it would have been more effective as a novel. I enjoyed reading it. I liked that when I realized that they were all going to be the same stories, I was able to read it like more quickly. I still read about a story a day, but because the stories are like 20 to 35 pages long, somewhere in there, that's how much I would have read if I was reading it as a novel as well. I thought it was great. I thought it was really interesting. As I've said before, I picked this for the October TBR spin because I thought it was Indigenous horror. It is not horror at all. I mean, it is horrific, and there are horrific elements in it, and it is very disturbing and upsetting, but it's not horror. It's real life. It's real life, and it's real life horror, you know. But I really enjoyed it. I'm so glad that I read it. So now we have to pick the November TBR spin for TBR spin 2024. It is January 7th, 2025, but I'm trying to get through my 2024 books before I start on 2025. On my TBR spin list for 2024, I have How to Love a Jamaican by Alexis Arthurs, The Institutionist by Colson Whitehead. This is short stories. I've never read from this author. This is a novel, and I've read one book from this author before. So let's see what the spin is. It looks like I watched Sarah's entire November video until the spin, so I think we'll just watch the spin. The spin was a book that would make you feel like an intellectual man at Oxbridge in the 1940s. Is that what it was? A book that makes you feel like a male intellectual in the 1940s at Oxbridge. So I had to look up Oxbridge. I thought I knew what it was, and I did know what it was. It is Cambridge and Oxford, so that makes sense. But these, I mean, The Institutionist is obviously a institution. Oxford and Cambridge are institutions, but I don't think that that's really the vibe. And then this one I don't think will fit at all. So let me pause and see what I can think of. I have some ideas. I'm back. My first impulse was either an Evelyn Waugh book or a E.M. Forster book, and I looked to see which E.M. Forster books I had, and none of them were really striking a chord. I have some short story collections, I have The Longest Journey, and then I did also go through all my Evelyn Waugh books, of which I have quite a few, and the one that I'm most interested is Decline and Fall, which is about, I think, a Cambridge or Oxford student who doesn't do well and then ends up going to like a little town school. And this was written before 1940. I think you have to pick something that was written in the 40s or before 1940 for this prompt because it was something that they would have read. So this is my first possibility. And then the other thought that I had was The New Life by Tom Crew, which is set in the very late 1800s, like the 1890s, and is about men in England researching homosexuality, and also it has to do with, what's his name? Oscar Wilde's arrest. So this is a possibility too. I've been wanting to read these. My next thought was to read either a Dorothy L. Sayers or an Agatha Christie, because those I feel like are something that a intellectual Oxbridge person in the 40s might have read, almost like in denial of their good, like, oh yeah, Christie, she's such a hack or whatever, but then like loved them and ate them up. And also the idea that maybe an intellectual would be reading something that wasn't super intellectual because they were doing their studies or whatever. But unfortunately, the Miss Marple series, which I'm reading in order, has gone past the 1940s, so I can't read one of those. The next Tommy and Tuppence book would fit right in, but I don't have a physical copy. And the next Lord Peter Wimsey book would fit right in, but I don't have a copy. And I'm still on my Read What You Own challenge, so I don't want to read something. I'm so close to being finished, so I don't want to read something that won't count for that. So I think I'm going to go with Decline and Fall. I haven't read an Evelyn Waugh in quite a while, and I do love his work. I've only read 2 of his books before. This one also is just about 300 pages, 293 pages, but look at the margins. They're huge, and the font is huge. So I feel like I can get through this one quickly, and I think it'll be a romp. I think his books are often a romp. Not Brideshead Revisited. There were some rompy parts of that, but I read The Loved One by Evelyn Waugh, and I absolutely adored it, and it was such a romp. I also have Scoop, which I was thinking of, but I think I'd rather read this one, and this one has more to do with like Oxbridge in general. So I will save The New Life, although I really, really want to read this. I just think this one's going to be really heavy and sad. This one also is big margins, big font. I think it would be pretty easy to get through, although I think this one is over 300 pages. Yeah, whoa, 390 pages or something, which is crazy. It doesn't even look that long. But I'm going to go with Decline and Fall by Evelyn Waugh for my November pick. So let me just watch the rest of Sarah's video to make sure I didn't miss anything and think about what book I'm going to kick off. Okay, so nothing revolutionary that she says, except she does mention that you can interpret this prompt however you want, which of course you can. You don't have to. Just because I picked a book that was written before in the 1940s or set before in the 1940s does not mean you have to do that, which I think is always a good point. I think people get really like bogged down with trying to fit the prompt like the only way that they see, but like just expand your interpretation of the prompt. It works. So between these two, I think I have to kick out The Institutionist, even though I am really excited to read this one and I would like to read it. It just wasn't on the original list and this one was, and I feel like hopefully we will maybe get one more original list for our December pick. So we're going to keep this one. We're going to kick this one off and we're going to read Decline and Fall, and I will see you in the next TBR Spin vlog. Thanks for helping me pick my 2025 TBR Spin list. That was exciting. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.